aren't good for each other. Like they seem like they are, but they're also just not.
No.
Um, but yeah, let
Not
me
where
get,
they not as the people that they were.
yeah,
Like
yeah.
if they got help, maybe.
Oh, 100%. Yeah, I think if they actually like therapized and if Joe wasn't coming from where he was with already many murders under his belt,
Yeah.
uh, maybe it would have been a different tale. I don't know. He also
Mhm.
probably wouldn't have ended up in California though.
Yeah. True.
But it is what it is. Yeah. But for my section, it's a lot less facts. It's not really a fact section, and more of a like. I didn't realize I would have such strong opinions about this show. section. It's an opinion based on logic and factual information more than it is actually about facts. So take it as you will. I'm just gonna like talk about what I thought.
You're allowed. You're allowed.
Yeah, every so often, got to throw it in there. So, in watching this show, there is so much to unpack. Like, all the characters are so interesting. And I don't know what it was like in the book. I'm sure Joe might have been interesting there just through like an absurdity angle. But
Mhm.
like all the characters in the show was just they were like all complex. Even the ones like you didn't like, you like were like, huh, I see how we got here though. Like, it was interesting.
Mhm.
And they're all so deeply flawed. And these flaws make them authentic in ways I don't always see on TV. And that, like, I talk about like my like spidey sense in realizing like authentic like emotion and acting. Like
Mhm.
I always get
Mhm.
really uncomfortable when people don't know what they're doing. They're acting. And this
Yeah.
acting was some of the best I've ever seen. Like I believed these people who definitely aren't these people
Yeah.
were like these characters the
Yeah.
entire time. At no point was I doubting like that this I was watching a TV show. Or like I that it was the reverse. If anything, I was like, wow, I'm like watching this like crazy true crime unravel.
Yeah.
And I'm like, wow, so this season in particular got me in my feelings multiple times, mostly in that it activated my own personal trauma and witnessing adults fail to protect children. But it's okay. And while I recognize trauma is never the child's fault, it was hard watching the children in the show, including young Joe, be harmed by the adults in their life. And it always gets me like even hearing like adults speak of their trauma when they were a kid. So it's like I'm happy I empathize with that, but I also don't simp for Joe, and I just want to make that abundantly clear.
Yes.
Because every time I do catch myself, like, oh, poor guy, I immediately shift back and stop myself, and I'm like, no, we're not going to excuse his unacceptable actions, though. He is a
Mhm.
monster.
Yeah.
And one thing I've learned in my personal journey is that we can understand why something happens and at the same time not accept it. And
Mhm.
the flashbacks to Joe's childhood that we see in season 2 are further expanded in season 3, providing this like additional context for Joe as a character, which was pretty interesting. But at the end of the day,
Mhm.
he is still a monster. And we do get some additional context for Love as well. And I do feel like by the end of it, I did leave that one episode where they did give her perspective, like wishing we kind of got more from her. I feel like they could do a spinoff of
Yeah,
her. Like she was just really interesting as a character.
I agree.
And like I would have liked to see more of her outside of just what Joe's perspective of who she was
Mhm.
was.
Mhm.
So yeah, Joe and Love unfortunately embody the phrase our trauma is not our fault, but it is like our personal responsibility to heal from it if when we become adults.
Mhm.
And Love and Joe both refuse adamantly to do any healing work and actively make harmful choices. And we see this in the adults in their lives also as they like mimic that back to them. And Love's mother, in the flashbacks of Joe's mother and father, many adults in their lives, at least like while they were young, and in Love's instance, even when they're an adult, follow a similar pattern to Joe and Love in not healing from their own trauma and in their decisions causing active harm. And Joe perpetuates this in his own adulthood, but in a more extreme way, obviously, through the serial murders, stalking, and desperate attempts at control. And the characters of Love and Joe are hard to navigate because there is a complicated way of humanizing them that they do in the show. And I've seen like a lot of critiques for this, in that like you do have people like simping hard for probably both characters. I'm not gonna lie, and I do think that that's a problem. But I do think like humanizing them as characters does help in understanding that murderers aren't these fantastical monsters of pure evil. Most
Mhm.
times they have the ability to deceive and present themselves as nice people and even possibly see themselves that way. The inverse of the problem with it is that you do at times end up sympathizing with Joe and Love, or even like rooting for their relationship in like brief moments where you're like, when they're talking about like dumb stuff that has nothing to do with the murder they just committed. And the show itself skirts this line between exposing Joe as a monster and providing the audience with points of sympathy towards him. What is most important to recognize when looking at characters like Joe and Love is that they have a responsibility for their actions, even though they don't see that.
Mhm.
And while Joe's childhood actively impacted his perception of right and wrong, as well as his approaches to relationships and love, his choices and actions are what define him. In becoming a killer, he made a monstrous choice, something he had never at any point takes responsibility for.
No.
And the reality being that Love and Joe both murdered people in their journeys, and instead of taking responsibility for those actions, they searched to justify them. They need to justify their actions because it's all in a pursuit of maintaining this perception that they had good intentions and that their actions are necessary.
And that
And we
it's
do,
somebody else's fault too. Like it's
yeah,
always somebody
100%.
else.
And I mean, I will say, like in the flashbacks to Joe's mom that we get in the show, she does the same exact thing.
Mhm.
In
Mhm.
abandoning him, she's like,
Yeah.
"Yeah, I know this is awful, and like you're struggling, you're experiencing this trauma, but like sometimes you just got to start fresh, hun."
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
she says that to this horribly traumatized child that she has straight up abandoned. So like, if
Yeah.
he learned it from anybody, it
Mhm.
was her. And I mean, the show, in many ways, in this fact that these are two white characters, shows this cultural belief that is present in white culture that to be good is inherent, when
Mhm.
in fact it is instead active decision making. Especially within white culture, being a good person is often totally separated from actual actions and choices, and instead is viewed as like a state of being, an instinct, or an intention. And we see like our characters embody this in their time. They're like, I murdered, but like I had a good reason to murder. Or like
Mhm.
I murdered because like this person was doing this, and like I'm still like a good person, you
Yeah.
know? And many times throughout the show, an adult in Joe's life will tell him he's a good person or a good boy or a nice guy.
Mhm.
And these statements are fed to him at conflicting moments where he makes choices that 100% do not align with the ideal of goodness. After murdering his father in a scene in actually not the third season, but the second season, I believe, Joe tells his mother, or Joe's mother tells him something to the effect of like, "You're a good boy. You were just protecting me. You wouldn't do a bad thing on purpose because you are good." As he has just murdered his dad.
Mhm.
So, like, morality as a result for him is subjective to his surroundings and those he seeks approval from. Um, so that's just like my little psychoanalysis on Joe. What was especially interesting to me was watching Joe and Love adapt in their new environment in the very different ways, and how that stemmed from their unique personal histories. So, like, where Love was able to adapt and assimilate, Joe, like, honestly struggles in California.
Mhm.
And Love's benefit is that like she got to be raised in an upper class California environment. She has been socialized as a woman. She has learned to adapt in ways that Joe never has. She's also like been a socialite, you know. She
Mhm.
knows how to
Mhm.
fake it. She knows how to get along with everybody, and that acts like actually adds to her ability to manipulate and like blend in and get away with stuff.
Mhm.
Um, but we see Joe really struggle in society because he's used to blending in the background. He's used to not really having
Mhm.
to talk to people. He's used to like
He likes being
being
invisible.
his invisible stalkery time, and he doesn't get to do that in the suburbs of California.
Mhm.
And like Love picks up on social cues in ways that Joe will never notice the subtleties of, because he was socialized in the East Coast, which has a very different vibe. And he was also raised without money. So like all these things kind of connect and impact his ability to assimilate somewhere like rich place, California suburb. And we see Love's success in this with her relationship with Sherry and the other Loke girls, but she's like able to form connections with others in a way, even if kind of inauthentic and shallow, that like Joe doesn't have the capacity to do. She's able to blend in. And because Joe's not able to blend in, I think that is largely why like his usual methods aren't working. You know, we see like his like spiral, even like getting a lot of things wrong. Like he's always trying to interpret people's intentions and like messing it up. you know?
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
he didn't really have that as much on the East Coast. And even when he first moved to California, you could see he was struggling, but like he was better at his job
Mhm.
on the East Coast than he is in California. And you can see him like struggling with this. And this can be seen specifically what stood out to me was his like instinct with Marianne's ex
Yeah.
and like failing to realize that he had noticed him. You know, he saw him at the AA meeting.
Yeah.
He was faking his drug recovery. You know what I mean? Like he was doing
Yeah.
all this stuff, and he failed to realize all of that because his upper class California environment is one that like is so different, and it's also he's not used to having eyes on him because in California suburbs, everyone is
Mhm.
watching you. They're looking at what your lawn looks
Everyone
like.
knows.
They're looking through your windows. They're doing the stalking back to you, and he's not used to that. And it almost gets him caught like multiple times, and it's invasive in a way right back towards him in a similar way to how he invades other people's privacy. And I think that like he's not accustomed to. And I thought that was just like a really interesting like mirror back
Yeah.
to him that the
Mhm.
show did that was really cool. I don't know if the book does it too. Does he go to California in the book, Gabe?
Yes. Yeah, I'll
Okay.
talk. I was gonna say in the book, it's so funny how, again, I keep saying how funny it is, but his complaints about California is hilarious. Like he is so loathsome for it, and he just groans about it. He hates how fake everyone is. And he even like he's like, I have to make friends. Like I have to get a social media account. I have to get Facebook friends, or it's weird. Like people are going to start thinking
Yeah.
you're really weird. And it does become a really big thing for him that he has to like assimilate in this way that he's not used to and start having like this paper trail, and be more like, or less of a wallflower than he's comfortable with. And it's such a
Yeah.
big thing for him. He hates California. It's very fun because for me, I was like, that's exactly how I feel sometimes if I interact with people from California. Like I was like, I do not like agree with Joe on most things he talks about. When he was talking about California, I was like, no, I get you. That's exactly right. You're right.
Yeah. And it's like really interesting for him because it's like invasive in a way where like he's not used to people breaking his privacy. He's
Yeah.
used to doing that to other people. So I just thought it was like a really fun inverse for him to be in California where there's cameras on every street, where
Uh-huh.
people are like accessing like his life in a way that he doesn't feel comfortable with and how much he dislikes it. So it's
Yeah.
just like, dude, what do you think you're doing? And it's like he has no self-awareness at any point ever or any sort. So it's like he doesn't pick up on the fact that it's like a nice reflection back to like show him what he's been doing to people. But it's still interesting. I just thought it was like a fun thing that they did. It's just very different for him. But yeah, there's also something to be said about the way that they showcase their like descent into hysteria that they do in the show and possibly in the books. The more murders that take place, uh, the more unhinged that they get, and it's like kind of
Yeah.
cool to see that happen. It reminds me of like the way that the Last of Us 2 video game did it, but with like far better pacing. We
Mm.
watch Joe and Love unravel more and more over time as their makeshift version of normal literally burns to the ground, and we also see them like lose touch, fumbling to maintain control through their experience. And this descent makes the story feel even more authentic because after each murder they lose a little bit more of their grip on like the situation in reality, because it
Hmm.
shouldn't be this easy to murder a bunch of people.
Yeah.
So it's good that they show like after you murdered one person there's going to be like a whole chain of events that takes place that's going to derail you. But you
Hmm.
really like see Joe and Love like kind of like lose it
Yeah.
a
It's
bit.
like the little lady who swallowed the fly,
Yeah.
and then she has to like swallow something else, and then swallow something else. That's them for
Yeah.
murder.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And what was fun about this season is it did give a little bit more like context for his childhood, and I really enjoyed that because you get like a clear glimpse of like how Joe established his logic and thought processes. So you get like context for the voice in his head, and just like how we got here. And like the how doesn't matter so much, or neither does the why. It's just more so like it's interesting because then also it's like you recognize that these are traumas that impact people and maybe we should take care of children more. But
Hmm.
yeah, we see a clear glimpse into Joe's logic when he's a child in episode 10. And in this episode, we see Kid Joe as he's talking to like one of his only friends at the group home, Polly, as they're looking at Nurse Fiona's office while it's being cleared out. And then Kid Joe says, it was her boyfriend. I could have stopped him. The last time it ruined my entire life. Paulie says back to him, "You mean like with your mom?" And then Kid Joe says, "It made her hate me so much, she put me here. So I thought with Fiona, I didn't want her to hate me too." And Paulie responds, "For the record, you don't know how your mom feels. You're making it up. And hey, trust me, I do it too. But I'll never actually know why mine left me here, and neither will you." And what's
Mm.
very interesting about that last sentence for me is that we clearly see that Joe struggles with understanding the intentions of others, that he struggles to empathize with his friends' shared feeling of abandonment. We see like him kind of like process that information. And to me, that statement brought his inner voice into context, because in misunderstanding others and their intentions, he has taught himself to speak on their behalf.
Mm.
He was never given the closure from his mom. You know, his inner voice is him guessing and rationalizing these choices and the actions of other people without giving them the chance to answer those questions themselves. And in fact, throughout the show, we see him continue to be wrong almost every time he makes an assumption, but he has accepted that he would never actually know the answer to why. So he stops listening or caring about what actual other people's thoughts are in an authentic way. He just creates this world in which he lives and is the protagonist of, and grips to that because that's the only thing that makes it so he can like do stuff. And Joe as a child in these scenes is defining his logic that carries him into adulthood, specifically with the death of Fiona. With Fiona, he was trying to learn from his mistakes he experienced with his mom, but in not murdering her boyfriend, he essentially like he hesitates with Fiona in a way he didn't with his mom. When his mom was like getting attacked by his dad, he didn't hesitate. He shot him. With
Mhm.
Fiona, he was like, "My mom left me here because of that. I'm not going to act on this." He had the opportunity to push her boyfriend down the steps, and he was like, "Nah." But as a result, Fiona ends up going missing and is realistically probably murdered by her boyfriend. So this kind of rationalizes for him, even though incorrect, that this situation was necessary to have murder happen. If he murdered Fiona's boyfriend while he had the chance, she'd still be alive. And this combined with this like anxious attachment style and this compulsion for control pulls Joe out of this exclusively hiding and watching state into action. So instead of
Mhm.
like before, he was like hiding in the closet. He was like, "I'm not going to do nothing. I'm just going to watch it happen and be sad."
Mhm.
And then with Fiona, he realized like, "I can't hide in the closet. I have to go murder somebody. Because like if I murder them, then they'd still be here. They probably will hate me, but that's fine because they'll still be alive." And it's like, that's how he sees it. You know what I'm
Mhm.
saying? Like that's how he
Yeah.
logics himself into being the hero. Because to
Mhm.
him, he's like, "I'm doing them a favor. I could have helped Fiona, but I didn't because I hesitated. So murder is the only way."
Mhm.
And that's how he sees it. And it's like awful because like kid him didn't have to end up that way. It is what it is. There's lots of people who experience a lot of trauma, come out of it, and they don't become murderers. You
Yeah.
know, they don't.
Most.
They don't. Yeah, the majority just end up being like regular people with like that cry a lot or like have
Yeah.
irrationally emotional responses to things, or they just get therapy and they have great lives. I don't know. You know,
Mhm.
everyone figures it out in their own way, but he made the active choice to murder people. And that's the problem. And it's sad because he didn't have to be that way, but
Yeah.
he really never had a person that protected him.
Mhm.
And that's where it's a bummer.
Yeah. I had one more point I was thinking when you were talking about love and how she like, was able to assimilate and kind of easier kind of get into that role. But there's also like this whole thing of like white woman victimhood too that she plays into, because the way that the young neighbor assumed that Joe was the problem and
Mhm.
that Joe did everything wrong and she needed to be rescued when in fact she was the one who did the murder.
Yeah.
It like adds to that because she's never really like, no, 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 it's not him. She never does that. She's like, yes, of
No.
course, save me. And she is always playing that victim card. That really comes
Yeah.
very easy for her. And that's
Oh
why, like,
yeah. She activates white woman tears like that all the time.
she's very good. She's such a great
Yeah.
actress. And that's why I think like it's so interesting having Marianne, because something about Marianne's character too is that like one, she's a person of color. Two,
Mhm.
she came from a similar background to Joe. So she sees him. Like she's one of the only characters who will say, like, where did you go? Like she
Mhm.
notices when he gets lost in his brain and he's doing his weird musing
Mhm.
stuff, and she's just like, "Where did you go just now?" Or like, "Hey," or like she like tries to snap him back. She sees him, and when
Mhm.
she sees like something ain't right, she's like, "Nope, nope, I'm leaving that. Nope, that's not. I am not the one." And I think that's
Yeah,
like
I
really,
for
oh,
sure.
so
I know what
good.
you're talking about, like, when Love's talking to her and
Yeah.
she's like, "Oh, yeah, okay, I believe you wholeheartedly. He is a threat. You're right. I'm gonna go take my kid and go somewhere else."
Okay,
Like,
thanks, bye.
she did not need any convincing, and she
No.
also was like, "Alright, yeah, no, I have a tendency to try to find people that remind me of my childhood. It's fine.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, he's a problem. I accept that.
Say
Goodbye
less.
forever."
Say less.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
'Cause she's not risking it. Absolutely not.
She's so good. Like even she has like there's a conversation with like Love where he could have gotten caught because she like makes this remark about how oh like Joe has had to, work late. And Marianne's like, yeah, well, oh, I'm dating this new guy and we're in this like, honeymoon phase. And so he's been taking like she's very quick to be like, oh, I
Yeah.
know she's gonna be stressed. Let me alleviate this.
Yeah, it's not because we're cheating.
So good. She's so good.
Yeah.
She's the best character. Always. She steals every show. That's why the only bearable reason to watch the Chilling Adventures of Sabrina is to see
Oh,
her.
yeah.
So and I mean everyone's really good in this
Yeah.
season. But of course, I was like, as soon as I saw her, I was like, oh yes.
Yeah.
And she's just so quick to be like this voice of reason that critiques the entirety of the show, like entirety of like the narratives that we've been buying into for seasons, where she's just
Yeah.
like,
Well,
this is
she's
a
like,
problem.
if she had a similar upbringing to Joe and that she's experienced a lot of trauma, she's not out there murdering people.
No, she's not. No,
She's
she
like,
had
"Oh,
like,
there
if
is a
anything,
different way."
self-harmed.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
wild. Yeah. That she's
She's
like
not
a
a good
really
kid.
great, like catalyst for him in that,
Yeah.
like, she's also seen some stuff and is like not out there murdering people. He didn't have to turn out this way and he made a choice and his choice was bad. And
Hmm.
that's why he's a bad person.
Yeah. And she's like, say less.
Yeah.
Bye. Cody.
I'm anxious for next season though, because I'm like sad that he followed her. I want better for her. I do not want them to be together. And I hope she murders him, but like in a way that's like self-defense, like and like, she lives her life and then he's finally done. Or like she's the one who gets him arrested or something. I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know. Maybe she finally ends him. What a nice
Yeah.
time that would be. And now I haven't read the third one, but now it's on my list.
Was
And
Marianne in the second one?
no,
No.
no,
Okay.
it's just Love. And in it, like she gets pregnant, they get married, and it's all because like he doesn't the whole thing was like he's going to jail, and so her family money is gonna get him out. Like they get him the best lawyer,
Oh.
tie into him, and then she like abandons him in the end. And he
Oh,
has to
that's
look
good.
at her and be like, oh, you know? Um, yeah.
Yeah. That's a
It,
good ending. Well, not that he got her out. Why would she get him out then?
because he's the father of her child.
Oh, okay.
And because
Well,
she was one dimensional, so she was
yeah.
like, oh, I have to protect the boy. It's a whole thing.
Yeah.
His favorite place on the planet.
Oh my
So
goodness.
good. So highly recommend the books and the seasons of the show. I also recommend just looking up some videos and clips of Penn like totally just
Talking about. Yeah.
dissing him because that's very fun too.
Yeah.
And yeah, we have 2 more episodes left of our Tainted Love series, and then we're moving on to something new. But please
Yep.
let us know what you think about you. If you read the books, what do you think? If there's something similar, I'm not aware of anything that's like this critical to true crime in this way. But if you
Yeah.
know of something, let us know, or just let us know your thoughts. Yeah, and any resources of like, what do you do if you have a stalker? That's also helpful.
Oh yeah. Yeah. No, for sure. And I mean, be safe out there, especially people who are still dating.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It's a
Or
hard.
even not, even if you're not dating.
Yeah,
Like,
he was after people who were in relationships. You're so right. Yeah, just be safe out there.
mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Don't trust even the average of Joes.
Yeah, because he's just a regular looking dude.
Dangerous.
Always anyone comes near you, you're like, nah, please go away. I'm not
Yeah.
interested in friendship.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It's good for illness prevention too. You know, pandemic rules forever.
Yeah.
That's kind of where I'm at.
6 feet. 6 feet. Thank you over there.
Yeah.
Thank you. For sure. Cool. Well, don't get married.
Delete your kids.
Or that's the only reason they keep you alive. And honestly, girl, you gotta think about it. Okay? If that's the reason, come on.
Yeah.
Come on.
Run.
Yeah, run. And I love.
Yeah. Maybe we'll get another season for her. Like a new
Show?
spinoff. Yeah, new show, but that just spell love.
Like in the past?
Yeah. yes, Gabe.
Okay.
Yeah.
I was like,
I saw the end. I know.
but yeah, watch anything she's in. Everyone go watch Haunting of Bly Manor. And like, she's in something else that I saw. Anyway, do that. Okay, bye.